Hey everybody and welcome. So you might notice a little bit of a change to the background. Long story short is one of you followers reached out to me and said, come on Dag, why don't you do something exciting with that wall behind you with all the years that you've done model aviation. So I thought, I'm going to go into all the parts and pieces I've collected over the last 40 years. And like my first 3D printed radial engines on the wall. I have propellers from 049s all the way up to my 150 kV electric motors I use. I've got props I designed myself. So everything on that back wall is kind of a little bit of my history. If you don't know who I am, my name's Dag, or that's my nickname, and I'm obsessed with giant scale electric model aircraft. And I've been doing this about 12 to 15 years. Depending on, I got into electrics about 15 years ago, but I've been into the giant scale stuff for about 12 years. And I love to design my own airframes. And I would create a lot of videos on my YouTube of me designing and building my airplanes. And a lot of people started saying, hey, why don't you just do videos answering people's questions and telling us how you design things. And it's the purpose of my YouTube is to share my experiences and success and failures. I hate it when people say, oh, try this, but they've never done it. And then you try it and you fail. And you're like, well, that was a waste of money. So I try to help people understand my path in this model aviation world in full scale, because I'm building an ultralight too. But everything I try to represent here on my YouTube is things I've done myself. So if you kind of follow what I do, you can have success. Now, if you follow some of my failures, you'll probably have some failures. But the reason for this, video is, I'm not really sure how to explain it, but I created a Patreon. And the reason I created a Patreon was because before that, I had created a website called atwoodaviation.net, and it's gone. But on it, I put all my drawings, all my CAD drawings, all of my STLs, all of my designs free. Because I just wanted to give them out free. But what happened was people misused them. They started selling them as their own designs. So I was talking to a bunch of my friends and said, I don't know what to do. And one of them says, create a Patreon, charge a couple of bucks, and that way who at least is getting your designs. So this video is about everything I offer on my Patreon and why I created my Patreon. But one of the things that I love about my Patreon is like this 2-row dummy radial engine that I 3D printed for my MSL2, which is a 188-inch wingspan, giant scale, 1925 or 30-ish racer I invented in my head. This is available on my Patreon, but there is just so much more that I've done, and it's crazy how much. When I think about, I only do this in the evening from about 9 o'clock until 11 because I've got a family, I've got work, I'm not retired. And to think of what I've done the last 20 years or 25 years, including all my CAD drawings, it's kind of crazy. So when you go to the front of my Patreon, you basically just see a Patreon front page. I do have some different levels, and I did this basically for you super fans that want to follow me, or not to follow me, but want to support me. For $5, you can get every drawing, STL, everything I've ever done. Okay, for the $8, sometimes you'll get more advanced stuff. You'll get fan requests, like you can request that I'll do some simple STLs or some simple design stuff. And then on the $14, which is the captain, so I have the navigator, the FO, which is the first officer. If you're a full-scale pilot, you know what an FO is. And then you have the captain. But realistically, even if you join at the 5 and you need help with something, just reach out and say, hey, Dad, can you do it? But if you super love that I'm giving away probably 50,000 hours worth of stuff and you want to join at 14, I appreciate that. But I'm not begging. I only did this to try to get my files out there. So what we're going to start with is, what do I offer with the CAD, Fusion 360, STLs, and Miscellaneous? And yes, I do give away my Fusion 360 files so you can scale, manipulate, do whatever you want. Just please don't resell these as your own designs. That's all I ask people to do, is don't F me over, okay? So when we talk about CAD, I want to be really clear about something when I talk about CAD. My drawings are nothing like a Zeroli drawing or even a Don Smith drawing. My drawings are the drawings I created for me to build the airplane from, for me to cut out all the pieces and know dimensionally how everything goes. So if you download one of my drawings, like on the C-130 here, you're going to get drawings that you could literally cut out and build the airframe. But I don't tell you what steps to take. I don't tell you anything like a good set of drawings would. So mine are not construction drawings like you would get from a Zeroli drawings. Mine are my own personal drawings that I had to draw in CAD so I could build my C-130. Same thing with my B-36. All the parts are in the drawings. Okay, so if you want to build a B-36, but here's a caveat. You need to be a hell of a builder. Okay? I've had 2 people use my C-130 drawings to build smaller C-130s, and they had great success. I've had somebody take the C-130 drawings and have all kinds of problems. And I worked them through it. But the thing was, it was basically their first time that they had ever used a bandsaw to cut out an airframe. And you've got to really be careful and accurate. And you know, there's a lot of skills that we learn when we work with wood. So I would not recommend downloading my B-36 drawings, scaling it to half scale, bringing it from 257 inches down to whatever half of that scale would be, and make that your first scratch build. I would not do that. Unless you just love to really have a lot of tension in your life. My 68% pits, these are extremely basic drawings, okay? But you can build that pits. Now, the thing is, these are CAD drawings. You can scale them whatever size you want. Somebody downloaded this drawing and built a 48-inch Pitts S1, and it's a cool little airplane. My T-28 drawings are available. And this is a plane that I've been wanting to build so bad, and I just haven't. I got too many things going on. But one person has built a T-28 from these drawings. But again, they scaled them down. This is a 160-inch wingspan plane. They scaled it down to, I think, about 60 inches. Now, they had to make their own cowling out of fiberglass. They had to make, I mean, they're going to have to build your own canopy. You're going to have to do your own injection mold, not injection molded, vacuum form canopy. But if you're a builder, these are some pretty cool drawings, especially for $5. My Mosquito, all my Mozzie drawings are on my Patreon. The MSL1, 197-inch wingspan. MSL2, which is my 188-inch wingspan. And believe it or not, I have a Piper Meridian. A friend of mine reached out to me and said, could you draw me a Piper Meridian? And I said, why not? Now, this was probably 8 years ago, but there is a Piper Meridian. I mean, now, the way the wing was originally designed was you used an end, you used 3 ribs to foam cut the wings, and the fuselage bulkheads was to make a fiberglass fuselage. There's no stringer places on the fuselage. But if you're decent at all with hot wire foam and decent at all with making a plug, this is a Piper Meridian. This is now my Fusion 360 files that I offer. And, excuse me, you know, for $5 for you to get all of these, it's incredible. I mean, there's a part of me that always wanted to sell these individually, but I got to be honest, everybody, people have so much fun with my engines 3D printing them themselves. I don't want to mention the names because they might be embarrassed or not want me to, you know, the CIA might be looking, who knows. But I have had so many people download my engines and just absolutely have a blast with them. So I've got my Mercedes engine, and I've got, this is a half kit. I think I show that in a minute. I've got my Continental 7-cylinder, which was real popular with Stearman's. Here's the upper half of that Mercedes engine. I've got a Larone, which is really nice. I actually have my Mercedes with the Hacker motor on the back, but I did not show the bearing placement and everything. And I'll probably be uploading that soon because I've had a lot of people want to bury a motor on the back of that Mercedes and put it in a Fokker, and that way it just looks really super scale. I originally did this for a guy that built a half-scale Fokker. He's not done with it. I can't use his name. but we experimented with putting that A60-16L on the back of it, hacker motor. It worked flawlessly. I have my Wright J5 that I designed for the guy that built the museum quality Spirit of St. Louis. This is to date the best 3D engine I've ever created. It was by far, this is the most kick-ass. And if you followed any of my videos and builds, you've seen what this looked like when it was done. But you get these files on my Patreon. I got Hellfire Missiles that I designed for a friend of mine that had a Bell Cobra helicopter that he competes with, and he needed some help. I think these are Hellfires, but I 3D printed that. I got a funky test little jet fan that I did for a friend that actually takes a Hacker A60-16L in there, and but he doesn't want me to show pictures because it keeps blowing up, but we're having fun with it. I've got the World War I machine gun. Then I got some of my own designs. These are the front steering assembly for my Frau Emmerstein, my big transport plane I'm building, and this is going to be kick-ass. It's going to be at CEF in 2023. I've got the brake system for my MSL2, the 188-inch, has independent brakes. So I have all of the files for that on my Patreon. I've actually got a turbocharge, supercharge, whatever the hell contraption this is for a P38, or it goes on the bottom of a B17. The sound looks pretty good. I've got some air scoops that I designed for a couple of pals. I have this variable pitch prop system that I'm developing now. It's going really good, but I haven't shown any videos or pictures of this in development because I just don't want all the trolls coming out of the woodwork telling me I'm doing it wrong or how I'm supposed to do stuff. But this is moving along pretty well. It's a variable pitch, so you can put the prop into beta and back up the airplane on the ground or slow it down if you're in a dive. Believe it or not, I put the B-36 Bombay Doors in here as 3D printed parts if you want to learn how to build Bombay Doors. I've got the flap system for my C-130 in here. I've actually got the main landing gears for the C-130 with those little micro brakes. I have some generic exhaust systems that I made for the MSL1. I have another funky little air scoop. I've got a funky little vent. I did a series of different little bitty cowlings. If you wanted to build a little foam airplane and find a cowling that fits it, these are the cowlings that go on it. Some of them are really bizarre. I've got my spinners. Now, I need to warn you, if you do the things I do, you're going to have a freaking blast. You're going to have an awesome time. But I have to give you a little bit of a warning. I have 3D printed a lot of spinners for pals, and none of them, knock on wood, have blown up yet. Not one of them. But I'm not telling that if you 3D print them, yours aren't going to blow up. So I do not sell, I use these as static spinners that you put on your model if it's on a static display. But I would not recommend you spinning these up, because when I 3D print, I know how to get the temperatures right for adhesion. I use higher pitch props to keep the RPMs down. There's a lot that goes into it. So by no way am I endorsing or condoning anybody using any of my spinners as real spinners, even though I do. And this is my 6-blade spinner for that 6-blade prop that I built for the C-130J version propeller. That is, I think, a P40. I don't know what spinner that is. I don't remember. These are Mozzie spinners. Okay. And then to round out the Fusion 360 stuff I have, I've actually pulled a couple of airframes into Fusion 360 from CAD. I have my STLs I'm going to talk about now. Now, these are STLs that are the scale that I built this engine. Okay, so you need to be careful when you're using STLs because you might be printing a 3rd scale engine. So make sure when you bring it into your slicer, you look at what size it is, and then you kind of figure out how you want to size this. Now, most of these engines are available as Fusion 360s. If you're on my Patreon and you see this as an STL and can't find it as a Fusion 360 that you want to shrink it or scale it, just send me a message through Patreon and I will readjust it. It takes me 2 to 3 weeks to get to it. I just want to be honest with you. I normally will say I'll get right to it, but to be honest, I'm doing so much for people, and all this happens between like 9 and 11 at night, folks. I mean, I've got a job that takes a lot of hours in the week. I've got a family that's kick-ass. I actually like my family. So all of this happens on the weekends or between 9 and 11 or 9 and midnight. And sometimes you'll see me post on my Facebook at like 3 in the morning. That just happens to be when I'm up doing things. This is just a front half of a Radial that's an STL I was playing around with. Here is that Continental as the STL. The Larone is STLs. The Wright J5 is STLs. The Machine Gun is STLs. All of these engines are STLs. This is the outer half of a Cub engine. Well, I call it the one half Cub engine. This sits on the outside of like your glow engine or your gas engine or your electric engine. I've had more people 3D print and put these on Cubs than anything I've ever invented. And actually this started out as a half-scale project for a half-scale Cub. And if you've followed me, you've seen what these look like 3D printed and painted up with a spark plug and wires. These things are just sexier than hell. They're awesome. This is another half-scale version I did with the exhaust. So this is really, really cool. I've done some bombs that are pretty cool. They're a little bit heavy, which actually in RC, you want your bombs to be heavy so they fall scale. If you drop your bomb and it flutters like a feather, that looks like BS. The twin row radial engine that I 3D printed for the MSL2 is available as STLs, but you want to rescale that. That's a 26-inch diameter engine. STLs for the top half of the Mercedes. This is the second most printed engine that I designed. I have some exhaust headers that you can scale for all kinds of different, I think P40 and P51s are the ones I designed. STL for the supercharger, turbocharger thing. Same thing. I mean, just about everything that's Fusion 360, I've got as an STL. And all of these are STLs. You can just take them into your slicer, scale them, and then turn them into a G code and print them. This is kind of neat. This is static. Okay, this is a Hamilton hub for a 4-blade prop on a Thunderbolt P47. A guy I can't name because I did this on consignment for him, but he does not care that I sell these or put them on my Patreon. But I spent a lot of time getting one of these scaled, believe it or not, half scale, because he made a prop that stuck on the side of his activity room in his house, and we 3D printed a half scale, and there were like 50 chunks of this, but I've actually scaled this down to I think about quarter scale or maybe even fifth scale. I don't remember what scale. I created this funky fan right here that a guy was putting on the outside of a drone. I mean, that's STL. This jet engine's STL. And then we have Miscellaneous. And this is my calculator for calculating how big your flying surfaces size are and how big the servos have to be to move it. So anytime I create a little calculator or create something in an Excel spreadsheet or something that helps us with model aviation, I'll put those on my Patreon too. So that's basically, that's not everything on my Patreon. I don't want this video to go on forever, but basically Fusion 360, CAD, and the STLs is what I've got on my Patreon. And I feel weird making this video because I'm not trying to make a lot of money off my Patreon. I'm trying to track who's got my files and drawings and stuff, or at least make them feel guilty that if they join my Patreon, download my drawing, and then sell it as their own, at least they feel like maybe they might just burn in hell. Okay, because I truly think if you steal from people in model aviation, you're going to burn in hell. No forgiveness, straight to hell. There's a green door, red door. You're going through the red door. But that's it, everybody. And so yeah, I mean, I could just go on about everything that's in my Patreon, but I'm going to shut it down now. All I would recommend is you think about this is when you, if you don't 3D print a lot, and you download one of my Radial engines, or any of my engines. Take the time to understand the supports that are going to hold to up, like the cylinder as it 3D prints, and some of the things so you don't have failed prints. Because what will happen is, if you imagine cutting a cylinder in half, a radial engine cylinder in half, and you're printing an arch, like the gateway arch basically. As these two parts get close to going to the top, your 3D printer sometimes, because of the heat, these will move a little bit. If your 3D printer hits that, it ruins the print. Okay, it can pop. It can destroy the cylinder. So the support that goes up in the middle of it, you need to have about a third of the top arc of the cylinder with support, so that all of that is being held together as it's 3D printing. Because when you have that big arch out there and there's nothing supporting it, as that ABS or ASA, nylon, whatever you print with, as the temperatures change a little bit, that will bend a little bit, and that will cause you problems. So that was one of the hardest things, because I used to build and sell my 3D printed radial engines until people started ripping me off, mostly international. South Africa ripped me off all the time. People in France ripped me off all the time. So I just quit doing them. And I thought about selling them just here in the U.S., but to be honest, some of you are dickheads out there. I mean, you don't understand the time that goes into this. And when I sell a 3D printed engine for like $50, and you think it's going to be like a Revell model kit engine, you know, maybe shame on me for not educating you that what 3D printed really looks like, okay? But if you look at the finished engines that I've built for people, they look sexy as hell. So you just got to take your time. If you're going to paint them, if you need to smooth them, you can actually dip them really quick in ABS sometimes. I mean, in acetone, dip it real quick, then set it and just let it sit. And as that acetone evaporates off, it will smooth it. If you follow me anytime, you know I built my own acetone vapor bath system that I don't talk about anymore, because if you do it wrong, you'll blow your house up. I know how to do it right, but you know, some people don't even know how to use a can opener. So that's it, everybody. If you haven't liked and subscribed yet, please like and subscribe. I'm trying to build my my YouTube channel. My goal is to get my Patreon, YouTube, and some sponsorships to pay for my hobby, so that my daughter can go to college. I'm paying for her college, and if I build too big of an airplane, I might have to tell her to take a semester off. And I'm kidding. So rock on, everybody. Have an awesome day. Please like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Be safe. And I always end my videos with take a kid flying. Find some 6-year-old. I mean, don't go to a park and just take a 6-year-old, but find a 6-year-old boy or girl. Give them a glider, one of those little Gillows balsa wood airplanes. Give them a rubber-powered plane. Get them into model aviation, because the coolest thing about model aviation is it teaches science, physics. It teaches you just how to love the accomplishments you have. It will introduce you to Karens and dickheads, because you're always going to have that old fart at the field that wants to tell everybody they're doing it wrong. But it keeps them away from the video games. When you're 6 to 12 years old, if all you're doing is murdering people in parks with machine guns on video games, that warps brains. I fully believe that if you get a kid into model aviation, it can prevent them from being a mass murderer one day. So rock on, everybody. Have an awesome day, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.